The wheels of the stagecoach kicked up dust as it rattled across the hard-packed prairie, its wood creaking in protest against the endless miles. Inside, Pearl May sat rigid, hands folded over her lap, her pale blue dress wrinkled from travel. Her bonnet shaded her face, but her eyes stayed fixed on the torn envelope in her lap, the one that had promised a future. A husband. A home. Safety. The ink was smudged now from the hours she'd spent tracing the words. I prefer a woman who doesn't talk too much. Respectful. Obedient. Quiet. Pearl had never been good with words. Not because she had none, but because in her father's house, every word was a weapon, used against her or held back to keep the peace. Silence became survival. So when she answered Tom McCall's letter, her reply was careful, spare, and respectful. She thought that would be enough. It wasn't. The town was little more than a sprawl of dust and timber, clinging to the edge of a wind-swept canyon. A crooked sign announced it as Sundown Gulch. The coach driver didn't wait long after stopping. He tipped his hat and tossed her satchel down before cracking the reins and leaving her in the street with nothing but the roar of departing wheels and the weight of too much hope. She spotted him right away. Tom McCall stood on the saloon porch, flanked by two chuckling men and a mangy dog gnawing at a boot heel. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered with a beard that hadn't seen a comb in days. He squinted at her, frowned, and spat a line of brown tobacco into the dirt. That her? One of the men asked. That's her, McCall grunted. Hellfire, she looks like a church mouse. Pearl approached slowly, her boots kicking up dust. She offered a small smile, extended a gloved hand. He didn't take it. Say something, he ordered. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her throat locked. She'd practiced this moment on the ride, the greeting, the thanks, the gentle tone. But the men's eyes burned through her dress, and the laughter behind her made the words vanish. Lord, she really is mute, McCall said. I was jokin' when I wrote that I wanted quiet. Didn't mean I wanted a corpse. They laughed. One of them elbowed McCall, saying, You order a bride or a ghost, Tom? Pearl felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She tried to speak again, a soft hello, catching behind her teeth, but it was too late. I ain't marrying no woman who don't talk, McCall growled. What am I supposed to do, play charades with her for 30 years? He turned, dug in his coat pocket, and tossed a small cloth pouch at her feet. It hit with a jingle. Stage fare, he said. Get back on the next coach. Or go haunt someone else's ranch. The saloon door slammed behind him. She stood in the dust, frozen. No one came to help. No one met her eyes. The laughter faded. Even the wind seemed to avoid her. That night, Pearl slept in the abandoned telegraph shack at the edge of town. A rat scurried across the floor, and her fingers clutched the hem of her dress as she sat with her back against the wall. Her satchel was tucked beneath her legs, her shoes unlaced, her pride shattered. The town's night echoed with piano keys from the saloon and distant howls. Once she heard a drunken voice outside, that mail-order mouse still here? Followed by raucous laughter. But no one came. At sunrise she walked the main road, unsure of what to do. No stagecoach would come again for weeks. She stepped into the general store. The owner, an older man with a stiff back and a foggy left eye, looked her over with a sigh. Sorry for what happened, miss, he muttered. But this ain't a place for Ling Aaron. Men round here ain't kind to women without someone to protect them. Pearl gave a nod and left. In the next building, the church, she found a traveling preacher and his young apprentice preparing a wagon. Blessings upon you, child, the preacher said warmly. We're headed to Fort Raymore. It's a military post. Safer place. You can come with us if you like. She nodded quickly, grateful beyond measure. They made ready to leave by mid-morning, and Pearl sat in the wagon bed beside crates of Bibles and lamp oil, staring at the sky that stretched endlessly above them. But kindness is a rare and fragile thing in rough country. Not 2 miles out, the wagon was ambushed. 3 masked men emerged from the ravine, shouting and firing warning shots. The preacher tried to reason with them. They pistol-whipped him for his trouble. The boy ran. Pearl did too. She slipped into the sagebrush, her legs trembling. A sharp rock tore her skirt. Her breath came in short gasps as she ducked behind a stand of dry brush and held still. She could hear the men shouting, laughing, looting. Then silence. She didn't dare move. Minutes passed. Then more. Then came the sound of a horse. Not running, approaching slowly. Hooves crunching gravel. A figure stopped near the brush. She peeked out. He was tall, still as stone, astride a lean painted horse. His dark hair was braided down his back, a single hawk feather woven through. He wore buckskin and beads, and his eyes, sharp and unreadable, met hers with no surprise, no judgment. Just curiosity. Her first instinct was fear. But he made no move toward her. No weapon drawn. No shout. Instead, he slowly dismounted and crouched beside a dying shrub. His fingers brushed the dirt, his gaze flicking toward a boot print. One of the bandits, perhaps. He was tracking. Pearl stood slowly. He glanced up, nodded once, then turned away, mounting his horse again. She didn't know why, but she followed. He didn't speak. Didn't look back. Just rode toward the canyon, the wind stirring the feather in his hair. She followed like a shadow, one silent soul trailing another. By the time the sun began to fall, casting blood-red streaks over the horizon, they reached a small hollow near a stream. He dismounted again, lit a fire with practiced ease, and placed dried meat near the flames. Pearl stayed back at first. But when he looked over and slid a strip toward her, she stepped forward, took it, and sat. Still no words. And yet, something passed between them. Not pity. Not demand. But recognition. He didn't ask her to explain herself. And she didn't expect him to. They shared a meal in silence, the firelight dancing across their faces, and for the first time since stepping off that stagecoach, Pearl's chest no longer felt heavy. Her hands stopped trembling. Her mind went still. There was no performance required here. No script she had to recite. Only presence. Only breath. Only silence. And for once in her life, that silence felt safe. Pearl awoke to the scent of smoke and juniper. For a moment she forgot where she was. The sky above her blushed with the early breath of dawn. She blinked up at the tall trees and the fading stars overhead, the cold still clinging to her dress like morning frost. The fire crackled a few feet away. He was there, seated cross-legged, his back straight, his hands working over a length of leather cord. He hadn't tied her. Hadn't touched her through the night. She was on a separate bed of woven grass, her blanket neatly tucked, her satchel resting beside her like a promise. She pushed herself upright slowly. He didn't look up. Instead, he slid a chunk of dried meat across a flat stone toward her and gestured to a water skin beside it. Gratitude tightened in her chest. She nodded, took the food, and sat quietly. He glanced at her just once and gave the faintest nod in return. They ate together in silence. The way deer might graze side by side, aware, cautious, but not afraid. Later he motioned for her to follow. They walked through the trees, the trail narrow and carved into a sloped ridge. He moved like shadow, like he belonged to the earth itself. Pearl stepped where he stepped, watched how he touched the bark, sniffed the air, paused to listen when the birds stopped singing. He crouched and pointed to a track, a split hoofprint in the mud. Deer. Then another, human. A bandit's boot tread. She recognized it from the ambush. He looked at her and for the first time spoke. "You ran well," he said, voice like gravel wrapped in calm. "You didn't scream." She lowered her eyes, unsure if that was praise or observation. "I am Tomato," he said after a pause. "Son of the Quahati. My people are gone. Some taken. Some scattered." She gave her name in a whisper. "Pearl." He repeated it, voice careful, as if weighing the name in his mouth. "Pearl. Means clear. Like sky before the storm." They hiked until noon. At the crest of a bluff, he motioned for her to sit beside him. Below them stretched the endless folds of the land, gold and green, shadowed by clouds. He spoke again. "Your people, they talk much. Loud. Always afraid silence means weakness." She looked down. "They said I was broken. Useless." He glanced sideways. "They lie." A beat of quiet passed. She felt her throat tighten, the dam inside threatening to burst. But she held it, letting the wind carry what she couldn't say. Tomato reached into his satchel and pulled a bone flute. He held it out to her. She shook her head. He insisted, placing it gently in her hands. She stared at the carved feathers along the side, at the smooth feel of it. "I watch," he said. "You see things others miss. You do not speak, but your eyes say many truths." She brought the flute to her lips and played a trembling off-key note. Tomato smiled faintly. Like wind learning to sing. They camped again that night in a narrow draw between two high rock walls. He built the fire low and small, shielding it from view. The horses grazed nearby, reins loose. As the stars took over the sky, Pearl asked her first question since arriving. "Why help me?" Tomato looked into the fire, then up at the moon. "You were alone. Like me. No need for more." They spoke little the next day, but understanding deepened. When he foraged, she carried. When he scouted, she watched his back. Their rhythm formed without words. He taught her how to tie a silent snare, how to read the wind's direction by tree bark, how to tell when an animal was near from the pattern of bird calls. Pearl absorbed everything not out of duty, but hunger. A hunger not for food but for purpose. For belonging. That evening, just before sundown, she saw smoke rising on the horizon. A thin, straight column. Tomato stiffened. "They're coming," he said. "The white men." She didn't ask how he knew. The tension in his shoulders was answer enough. "They think I took you. They believe lies before truth." Pearl's stomach turned. McCall. He had to have told them she was stolen. Claimed she'd been abducted. In this land, that accusation was enough to send bullets flying. Tomato stood and began moving, quickly but calmly. He gathered gear, snuffed the fire, scattered their trail. Pearl followed. Her heart pounded, but her limbs obeyed. They reached a high ridge as the posse rode into view below. 5 riders, maybe 6, all white men, rifles slung across their backs. One wore McCall's coat. She recognized it. Tomato knelt beside her, eyes narrowing. "They will not listen. They come for war." Pearl touched his arm. "We can run." "No," his voice dropped to a whisper. "We turn their hunt against them." He led her to a narrow gulch with multiple choke points, natural pitfalls and blind curves. He moved swiftly, placing rocks, tying lines across branches, hiding snares in the grass. Pearl helped where she could, mimicking him, her hands learning quickly. Then they waited. Night fell. The men entered the gulch loud, swearing, shouting, torches flaring. Tomato gave her one look. "Stay hidden." She obeyed. The first trap triggered. A horse screamed as its legs snapped in a hidden snare. A rider was thrown and didn't rise. Gunfire erupted in panic. Another man turned to flee and plunged straight into a camouflaged pit. Cries echoed off stone. "Get them," someone screamed. "I see the engine. He's here." Pearl heard movement near her. A rider broke from the group, circling around. He didn't see her until she stepped from the brush. His shot gave her just enough time to swing. The branch connected with his jaw. He dropped. She grabbed his rifle and tossed it into the ravine. Heavy breathing. Blood on her sleeve. Her hands trembled, but her spine stayed straight. Tomato emerged from the shadows minutes later. One rider remained, retreating. The rest were too injured or too afraid to continue. He looked at Pearl. "You fought." She nodded. "I wasn't going to be taken again." He stepped close, not touching her, just close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "You are not broken," he said. "You are listening. The world speaks, but few hear it." She met his eyes, the firelight flickering in them like stars dancing on a black lake. "What do I do now?" she asked softly. He tilted his head. "Now, you ride beside me." The wind stirred the trees around them, carrying the smoke of a dying fire and the scent of juniper. Somewhere behind them, the posse would limp home with stories they wouldn't understand. But Pearl? She understood now. Silence was not weakness. It was power. And beside this man who never asked her to change, she would become something stronger than words could ever shape. The dawn broke with amber light stretching across the plains, casting long shadows that danced beneath Pearl's horse as she rode. Beside her, Tomato moved with quiet precision, his body at ease in the saddle, his gaze constantly scanning the horizon. Days had passed since they'd turned the hunters away. Since Pearl had found her voice, not in words but in action. Now they were riding back to Sundown Gulch. Not because they had to, because she had chosen to. Pearl's dress was no longer the pale blue of a mail-order bride, but a faded blend of prairie dust and hand-stitched leather. Her locket, once hidden beneath lace, now hung proudly around her neck. Her silence had once been armor. Now it was presence. Intentional. Controlled. It drew attention not out of pity but curiosity, even fear. As they crested a hill overlooking the town, Tomato slowed his horse. Below, Sundown Gulch churned with movement. Wagons rolled, smoke curled from chimneys, and on the saloon porch Tom McCall leaned in a rocking chair with a bottle in one hand and a shotgun propped beside him. He saw them. He stood slowly, like a man who couldn't believe what he was seeing. Tomato looked at Pearl. "You don't have to." "I know," she said. She nudged her horse forward. They rode straight down the main street. Heads turned. Eyes widened. Children stopped playing. A shopkeeper dropped a crate of apples that scattered into the dust. The silence in town grew thicker than any words. Pearl dismounted first. Tomato followed. Tom stepped down from the porch, forcing a laugh. "Well, look who crawled back out of the wilderness. Thought you were dead, girl?" Pearl said nothing. She walked right past him and onto the saloon steps. She got taken all right, Tom said louder, addressing the crowd forming. Stolen by that savage. Must have brainwashed her out there in the brush. He was trying to provoke her. Trying to rewrite the story. Pearl turned slowly to face him. I wasn't taken, she said, her voice quiet but steady, carrying like a bell in the cold. I left. The crowd murmured. Tom's mouth twitched. She don't know what she's saying, he spat. You saw her. Wouldn't talk to no one. Broken thing she was. You think she came back all on her own? Pearl stepped off the porch and removed something from her satchel. A worn piece of paper. His letter. She handed it to the blacksmith, a fair-minded man known to read contracts. He scanned it, then looked at McCall. You said in writing you wanted her quiet. You got what you asked for, Tom. She's lying. Tom snapped. They're all lying. The Injun threatened me. No, Pearl's voice cut through like flint. You're afraid. That I didn't need you. That I found my strength without you. Tom's hand twitched toward his shotgun. And then Tomato moved. He didn't draw a weapon. He stepped forward, stood between Tom and Pearl, and simply looked at him. Tom froze. There was something in Tomato's stillness, something that made even the most hardened men reconsider their own bravado. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to reach for his knife. His calm was more threatening than any fury. You've hurt her enough, Tomato said. Tom stepped back. One pace. Then another. Pearl faced the crowd again. He told you I was too quiet, she said. So you laughed. You watched. You turned away. There was no bitterness in her voice. Just truth. And it struck deeper than anger ever could. I won't stay here. But I won't run either. I came back to speak the truth because I want the next girl you mocked to know. Someone stood up once. The saloon keeper, a weary woman with a scarred hand and a sharp tongue, stepped forward. I saw McCall the day she arrived, she said. He never gave her a chance. She didn't need rescuing. He just needed someone to bully. Others began nodding. A woman who ran the laundry. A clerk. Even the preacher's apprentice, his arm still in a sling, spoke up. She saved my life, he said. That woman you thought was weak. Tom's face paled. The sheriff arrived, summoned by the commotion. After a brief inquiry, after listening to both sides, he spoke. No crime here. But plenty of shame. He looked at Tom. Best you keep your head down, McCall. The town's heard her side now. Pearl turned, walked to her horse and mounted. As she did, a woman from the crowd stepped forward, someone she didn't recognize. Middle-aged, soft-spoken. You don't have to go, the woman said. We can help you start over. Pearl gave a soft smile. I already have. Tomato joined her. Together they rode west, the sun warming their backs, the wind in their hair. Not fast. Not fleeing. But free. Hours passed. The plains opened wide around them again, stretching like a canvas waiting to be painted. Tomato spoke, not looking at her. You were never quiet. They just never listened. She smiled. Neither did I for a long time. What now? She looked ahead, past the horizon to the vast unknown. Now, I live loud, she said, even if I never raise my voice. They camped that night beneath a sky bursting with stars. Tomato lit a small fire. Pearl played the bone flute he'd given her, the melody soft and haunting. It was not a song of grief. It was a song of return. Somewhere in that quiet she found a language older than words. And in the flicker of flame and shadow he listened, not to what she said but to what she meant. In a world that tried to silence her, she had found one man who understood her better than anyone ever had. And in that understanding, she had found peace. The flames danced. The stars watched. And in the hush of the prairie, the wind carried her silence farther than any scream ever could.